All right, this time I'm going to make sure we are unmuted at the start of this podcast. Uh, so I made sure I was unmuted, which is great, but what I did not make sure to do was make sure that there was a webcam working, which is frustrating. So let's get that solved. And we will get going soon. Just give me one sec. There's always gotta be something. You know what I mean? It just keeps everything else interesting, I feel like. Because why have everything perfectly work every time, all the time? That would be way too easy. All right, did that do the trick? Let's find out. Remove, amazing. Hit this. Where are you? Where is video capture? There it is. Hello, machine. Aha! We've done it. Fantastic. All right. Perfect. Well, the webcam border is a little off now, but that's okay. Might as well just delete that guy. All right. Perfect. Amazing news. All right, we're in. Sorry to everybody that was online. For whatever reason, I can't seem to launch perfectly every single time. There always has to be something that gets in the way. But thank you guys for holding on. Thank you for waiting. I'm going to hit this record button, and we're going to get started. So hello, everybody, and welcome to the Money Shift podcast. I am Thanasi. And this week we got two things. No, this is not League, John. That comes another time, you know. But today we got a couple things going on. So one, we got news. There's actually a good amount of car news stuff this week, including a lot of stuff in the racing realm, which is something that I'm way more excited for, to be frank, than passenger cars. But then after that, we got a subject that I think is very important. It is something that is really kind of gotten to me lately, and I don't know if it's just because I'm seeing or a part of all of this race car news, or excuse me, all of this car news, and because of that I'm just more jaded and desensitized to all of these numbers. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's just I'm overall a more bitter person now. I don't know. But anyway, we got to have a discussion. We got to talk about modern cars, because I really think we're approaching the point of no return, and we'll get to that later. If those of you saw the Money Shift post on Facebook or the post on my personal Facebook, you'll know what I'm talking about, but stay tuned for that. That comes at the end. But for now, because this is the Money Shift YouTube, Jesus. Because this is the Money Shift podcast, we're going to cover today's news, and it starts with the personal collection. Those of you ask me, those of you continue to ask me, you say, Thanasi, I know you recently got a 2005 Phaeton. Is it still running? And I feel like this should be a weekly segment where I just update you guys on whether the Volkswagen continues to run. Hence why I've gotten these circle glasses. I don't know if you guys can see them on the camera. They tend to kind of blur in, but I feel like driving the Phaeton every day has progressively turned me into an old German automotive engineer, which is why I now have circular lenses. I don't know. Maybe I'll just change them, I guess, after we stop talking about the Phaeton. But anyway, the Volkswagen Phaeton is still running. I put about 3,000 miles on it now, so not a small amount, not a huge amount either. But the only problem still remains the HIDs. I think I have a window regulator problem coming, but because it's the winter in New England, I'm likely not putting those suckers down anyway. So I don't care about that window regulator, and I'm going to ignore it till I have to put my windows down. But as it stands right now, the car has no issues. I get around 400 miles per tank, which equates to like 20 mpg. So similar to a light duty pickup, I guess, but at least I'm rolling in a lot more comfort. The in-car dehumidifier is hilariously useful, and I think it's something that I've tremendously underrated and might in fact actually be my favorite feature on the car. I think one of the funniest things is just getting in and there not being any condensation on the windows, and also as I'm driving, nothing ever fogs up, which for those of you that are in the New England area or just in colder climates in general, you know what I'm talking about. You're playing that fine balance of like, do I put the window down? Do I have to turn the heat up? How do I get rid of this stupid fog on my windshield? Don't have to worry about it. Just let the car do its thing. It's 2005 tech, and in 2005, they believed everything should be done for you in one sense. So I'm super happy to continue to enjoy all of those pleasantries problem-free. As far as the Honda goes, the Civic finally is getting a suspension overhaul. So we have ASR coilovers with Swift springs. Why is that? It's just tremendously hard to say that. Sorry, guys. With Swift springs, we have all the control arms, all of them. New rear trailing arms, which is the disc brake conversion for this coupe that includes a roll center correction. So when you're lowering a multi-link suspension vehicle, you're throwing off that geometry that makes multi-link special. So there's a company called Honed. They make a roll center correction kit for the Honda. So when you lower the car, it maintains the geometry of OEM. So I'm super excited to get all that on. Super excited to then get the new wheel and tire on, and then it'll just be ready. It just needs to then warm up. I know I'm not in Florida like some of you, or in California or in warmer climates where you're attending a track day in December. But it is what it is. The car will be ready next year, and I'm excited to document through it. So without further ado, let's get started with this week's news. And we're going to start with race cars, because there was a lot of race car news. Saw them today, look tight. Thanks, Nico. Yeah, I'm excited for them. Really, really excited for that suspension. I'll post a photo on the MoneyShift Instagram and Facebook page so y'all can check it out. ASR makes great stuff, so I'm really, really pumped to get that on the car. So, without further ado, race cars. First up, 2021 Porsche 911 GT3 Cup car. So this is not the GT3 car that you'll see racing like Corvettes, Ford GTs, well, not those anymore, but Corvettes, the M8, things like that. This is not that car. This is the car that competes in the Mobil 1 Super Cup and the Carrera Cup. So that is the spec series, the homologation series, where the goal is to just be the best driver and set up the best car because everyone has the same vehicle. So for the first time ever, Porsche is actually using the wider body on this 911 Cup car. They're using the turbo body. So up until previous, they've been using the narrow body 911s. Shout out to Roof. Narrow body maybe does equal faster in a straight line. And it was really funny to actually see when the Cup cars would be competing against GT3 LM vehicles. So there's a US series that actually has both of those cars together at the same time. And what you would often see would be those Cup cars catch up and maybe pass the GT3 LM cars on the straights because they were the narrower body, they were more slippery, and would just have a higher top speed. But now these cars have the turbo body, so they're a bit wider. 70% of the body is now aluminum, which is up from 30% in the 991 Cup cars, and 30% of the car is steel, which is down from 70%. So they literally reversed the percentage that was steel and the percentage that was aluminum in the 992 GT3 Cup cars. So that's pretty freaking rad. A lot of aluminum there. The doors, the hood, the wing, all of that is carbon reinforced plastic. Big shout out to the BMW i3, which really popularized carbon reinforced plastics in production cars. I know this is a race car, but that tech has been like dribbled down to the common cars that you or I can buy in the form of the i3 and some other vehicles. In addition, we all want to know what is powering this thing. So the Porsche GT3 Cup has a 4-liter naturally aspirated flat six. It utilizes a dry sump to generate 510 horsepower and 346 pound-feet of torque. Not a big torque number, but it makes sense because this is a naturally aspirated car. So you're not going to be getting equivalent horsepower and torque numbers. It is what it is. But it also means this car revs to 8,700. So it's a screamer. And if you've had the luxury or the ability to see these cars on track and just hear them, they sound tremendous. But remember that 510 horsepower number. We're going to revisit that in our conversation later because I think it's important to remember where the race cars exist and then where performance and just modern day passenger cars exist. So moving on, let's talk about Le Mans, and not just Le Mans, but the hypercar and LMD classes. So what you're looking at on screen right now is the underpinnings, okay? The underpinnings of the Peugeot Hyperclass car. Couple things stand out. One, look at how close that human being is going to be sitting to the ground. Tremendous. And for those of you that are listening to the podcast, effectively what is being shown on screen right now is the wheels and what power unit is going to be used in the Peugeot Hypercar car. Yes, that makes sense. This isn't like NFL League or ATM machine. Hypercar car actually makes sense. And the reason why it makes sense is because Peugeot chose the hypercar class to compete in at the Le Mans race. So there are two classes that are really competitive enough to compete for the overall win. There is the hypercar class, and then there is the Le Mans Daytona hybrid class. So the Le Mans Daytona hybrid class is one where they really tried to standardize a lot of the different components that would be in the race cars. The reason for that, the name of cost savings, right? This is where you'll have a couple manufacturers enter that didn't want to pony up the big bucks to develop something in the hypercar class, but it will share a lot of components with the other cars in the field. So they might not stand out as much, they might not have crazy unique powertrains, but they'll be able to compete for the overall win. This car is not that. This competes in the hypercar class. So known as the Hybrid 4 500 kW, this Peugeot has two power units. One, 2.6 liter twin turbo mid-mounted V6. That engine makes 680 horsepower on its own. The second engine, an electric motor. That electric motor is at the front axle and it's fed by a 900 volt battery, and it adds an additional 272 horsepower. Okay, so I know what you're thinking. Thanasi, combined, that's 952. But isn't that higher than the regulation in the class? You'd be correct. The regulation in the hypercar class is actually 680 horsepower. So what that means is most of the time, the petrol engine's power will actually be capped. And when the battery runs out, the petrol motor will have the ability to scale back up to 680. Do you see what I mean? So if they're running the race and they run out of battery, that motor that was previously detuned to maybe 400 or 500 horsepower can now make its full 680, thus meeting the regulations in the hypercar class. I'm curious how that pans out in the sense that, does the car drive different when it's mixed powertrain versus when it's just 100% petrol making that power? How does that change in terms if you're on throttle and the power from the electric motor cuts, is that seamless, or is there going to be something there? Anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that pays out. But the other thing that's interesting is where they're choosing to use that front-mounted electric power. So interestingly enough, it can only be used either at the pit lane, okay, so when you're driving to your stop or leaving your stop, or it's used at speeds over 75 miles per hour, which is interesting to me. Now, I'll admit, I don't know enough about the rules and regulations to know whether that is something that is just standardized or whether that was Peugeot's own doing, in the sense that they thought that that would be the best use of this sort of electric motor. But it creates for an interesting thing, right? Because that means that in lower speed situations and corners and things like that, this is going to be a rear-wheel drive machine with 680 horsepower. But in higher speed situations, higher speed corners, what have you, it's going to be an all-wheel drive car. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Peugeot has been known to make scorchers on the Le Mans track, whether you look at their 1993 Le Mans winning Peugeot 905 or 903, or whether you look at their late 2000s winning 908s HDI, they've been known to make cars that run the Circuit de la Sarthe like nothing else, and if they have the reliability to finish, they'll win. So maybe this is the right recipe for electric power. Who knows? We'll see. I'm excited. The other thing I'm excited about that is related to the hypercar class is that Porsche announces that they will be returning to the WEC. So Porsche left Le Mans with the 919 on a high note, right? They took the victory. They said, everyone else, hold this L. We're out of here. We're out on top. We're going to Formula E. Well, turns out they're back, and that is thanks to the Le Mans Daytona hybrid class that I talked about at the beginning of this segment. Porsche's director of factory motorsports said it is much more cost efficient than the hypercar class. IMSA and WEC are working for the closest possible racing. So effectively, he's saying that without this LMDH class, we wouldn't be getting Porsche in the top spec of endurance racing. So I, for one, am happy that it exists, right? Because we've already shown one automaker in Peugeot that is developing a hypercar class car, but then another automaker in Porsche that's joining the fight, but in the LMDH class. So it'll be interesting to see how that pays out and it just like what the overall result is. Do these LMD cars actually have a shot to take the overall victory? Or is it truly those hypercar class vehicles that have the ability to exploit certain rule sets in order to really just create the faster car? Porsche's really excited for the LMDH class because not only does it allow them to compete in things like the Le Mans 24-hour and other WEC races, but it also allows them to compete in the States. For those of you that are not privy or just don't know much about the North American motorsports scene, there's the Tudor Series, which is now, I believe, called IMSA, that leverages Daytona prototypes as their top spec category, where the aero packages are overall pretty spec. There's a couple different chassis designers, but the shapes are largely similar. And then where they get a bit interesting is the power. You have some turbos, you have some big V8s, things like that. And that is going to be sort of the basis of the Le Mans Daytona hybrid class. That's what that class graduates to. So that means that Porsche will be competing with marques like Cadillac, Mazda, and other companies that have already established themselves in the Le Mans Daytona prototype sort of class. So that's super exciting. I'm pumped to see Porsche back in this class. They're one of the storied marques in the overall Le Mans space, right? So to see them compete is going to be pretty awesome. So that'll be great. But let's move on to passenger vehicles, shall we? So we're going to start off with Zoox. Zoox is the Amazon-owned autonomous company out of the Bay Area. They've announced their electric robo-taxi, think Cruise Origin, which is GM's competition to this segment. It is slightly smaller than a Chevrolet Spark, so that gives you the overall size of this thing. It is definitely on the compact side of things. There's no doubt about that. Inside those sliding doors, you have 2 sofa benches that face one another. This thing can travel autonomously at up to 75 miles per hour and has a 133 kilowatt hour battery, which Zoox says allows this thing to do 16 hours of continuous operation. Again, the end goal is for this thing to be a robotic taxi, and the brand already has autonomous vehicles driving around the Bay Area and Las Vegas, either doing taxi activities or driving autonomously in those areas with drivers behind the wheel, just ready to step in should anything go wrong. Now, these things have LiDAR with 270-degree camera view and apparently can see up to 500 feet in front of them, which is pretty impressive. We'll see what happens with that. We'll see where it goes. But it's a cool-looking car, and, you know, sometimes I do want to be driven around. Drive me to the bar, Zoox. That'd be nice. Moving on to some more autonomous-like news, GM announced that their Super Cruise function is going to be making its way to the GMC Sierra. And this is pretty special for a couple reasons. One, it means that the brand is continuing to extend their offerings of the Super Cruise technology to their other vehicles. Now, they already announced that it's going to be making its way into cars like the Bolt, cars like the Traverse, things like that, but announcing that it's going into the pickup means a couple things. One, it means that for the first time in this segment, we'll have this level of autonomy. Remember, in some states, you legally can take your hands off the wheel. That's how good Super Cruise is. And by most third-party tests, Super Cruise comes out on top in terms of autonomous ability, like the car's ability to drive itself and manage in difficult situations. So that's one. Number two, you'll be able to use Super Cruise while towing. Think about that for a second. So you're driving from, let's say you're Joe. Joe's in the comments. He knows what I'm about to say. Let's say you're going from Medford or somewhere in Massachusetts, right? Malden, wherever, Worcester, whatever town. And you want to go to Watkins Glen International Speedway, right? That's not 45 minutes away. That's hours. And if Joe's in the comments, he could let us know how many hours. But I'm going to say it's 7. Not knowing offhand, not having made the drive, or having looked up that information for this segment. Now imagine being able, okay, to tow your machine, all right? But now you have the ability to leverage autonomous technology like Super Cruise, okay, to make that easier. You can tow your Miata. Your pickup will do it for you. Now, I'm not saying that Super Cruise is something where you can go to bed and wake up at Watkins Glen International Speedway and be able to run your spec Miata to times that are a lot slower than a Camaro. But what I am saying is I welcome any and all technological advancements, and this certainly is one. And Joe, you're totally right. Yeah, but Tesla's better. Tesla's better. Okay, Tesla technology is very good. The autonomous systems are solid. There's no doubt about that. They're constantly advancing, but that's not to say that other ones don't exist. GM Super Cruise is a fantastic system, okay? Joe says he almost ran out of gas in my Sequoia on my trip there. You know what? I'm not surprised, because if there's something the Toyota Sequoia is not known for, it's stellar MPG, okay? I think you would actually run out of gas going to your local gas station, regardless of how much gas is in your tank, right? Let's be real. So moving on. All right, let's get to, I actually didn't want to show this, but I will. Let's talk about that. Why not? Fred Fox says Skynet, not even once. Yeah, sure. I know there's going to be a lot of people that don't trust the sort of, ability of Super Cruise or Tesla's autonomous, but hey, this isn't for you. That's not to say the technology shouldn't exist, right? It's here. You embodied it perfectly. Yeah, you're totally right. A lot of people just think their cars are the best, but they aren't. Okay, they aren't. Quickly, before we actually get to the next segment, I actually do want to talk about the next segment. Yeah, because we got a big part at the end of the show, and I don't want to keep you guys waiting till we get to the juicy section where I got a bone to pick with most of you, okay? So let's talk about the Hennessy Venom F5. For those of you that aren't privy to who Hennessy is for whatever reason, Hennessy is a known tuner of a lot of American muscle. So they've taken, they've taken Vipers from Mild to Wild, Corvettes from Mild to Wild, pickups from Mild to Wild. Anything and everything has been upped, right? There is no doubt they've made performance vehicles. Now, we can talk about what they've done in the past in terms of, parting out some customer cars to make, rent payments and things like that. Hennessy is a known crook in some respects. Yeah, Fred, I mimic that. Yeah, he's a known crook, 100%. He's definitely ripped off some people in his time, but let's put the past in the past for just a second, and let's talk about the Hennessy Venom F5, okay? Because while they've shown this car recently, I think they showed it like a year ago, right? That yellow one. No details were known about it, but here it is. This is the production Venom F5, and here are the details, and they include something that I'm actually really, really excited about. Yeah, Fred, 100% right. He does build some badass shit. There's no doubt about it, and I'm going to venture to say this is one of them. For sure. So, okay, let's talk about this thing. One, the motor. You're looking at it right there. It has a 6.6 liter V8 engine that they're calling Fury. I freaking hate that name. Fury? Are you kidding? Anyway, what is this engine? So it is a hand-built, Hennessy's words, not mine, so who knows what that means. It's a cast iron block. Okay, with aluminum cylinder heads and a dry sump. Slap on 2 turbochargers, and they say that this is the most powerful production car ever. So what does that mean? That means 1,817 horsepower and 1,193 pound-feet of torque. That is a lot of power and a lot of torque, and maybe that's why this thing has a cast iron block to handle all of that power and to handle repeated use of that power. So continuing, you're looking at a bespoke carbon fiber monocoque that weighs 190 pounds. You can see it especially there in the interior shots where when the doors opened, you can see the carbon fiber, right? So what does that mean for weight? This thing comes in at just a hair below 3,000 pounds, meaning it weighs 2,998 pounds. And Fred says, here's the thing, what tires will keep that thing down? Who knows? I'm sure they'll just put whatever tires on whatever hypercar that managed to rein those things in. Yeah, Joe says Fury tires. Maybe you're right. Maybe they put the Fury tires into the... No, it'll probably be something like Freedom. They'll get Firestone to create some corny-ass tire that says Freedom. And on the side where it would say Firestone Freedom, it's just the pattern of the American flag that just streaks across the profile of the tire. Anyway, what's the performance of this thing? Hennessy says it'll do 311 miles per hour, and they're actually testing this in a couple weeks. A bunch of people are going. I'm sure they're going to invite YouTubers, so we'll see if it can actually hit that, because if it can, that means it is, in fact, faster than cars like the Bugatti Chiron 300, so that would certainly be impressive. But the thing that I'm most excited about, okay, the thing that will lead us into the core meat and potatoes subject of this podcast and the conversation that I want to have with everyone. Let's talk about the drive modes to this car and what Hennessy is doing to really, really okay? Make this right. So the drive modes of this car: sport, makes sense. Track, makes sense. Drag, okay, makes sense. Wet, yeah, that makes sense, when it's wet out. But they also have F5 mode. And I know what you're saying. You said, Thanasi, the car's called F5, so what is that, like a personal mode or like, valet? Like what does F5 mean? I'll tell you what F5 means. F5 means all the freaking horsepower. Okay? It means that when you put this car into F5 mode, you will have all 1,800 horsepower and all 1,100 pound-feet of torque. No, Fred, you are going to like this, and I'll tell you why. Hennessy says that they will only enable F5 mode after you've completed a day of driver training with Hennessy. Okay, so he says just pitching the owner the keys would be irresponsible. If you gave them the keys and gave them the potential to unlock all 1,800 horsepower without telling them how to use it, it would be a bad look for him. So, as a result, he's only allowing you to enable that mode if you've done some training and maybe you'll learn how to better understand it. Now, your argument could be, Thanasi, let's be real. There is no way in hell that you'll be able to harness all of that power after just, 10 hours of training? Not even. And you know what? To that, I'll say you're right. You know what? It takes a lot of time to be as good of a driver as someone like Joe in the comments section who's driving a spec Miata, right, as fast as he can. It doesn't take 24 hours to become Joe. It doesn't take 24 hours to become Fred. You're training all these people in these exotic cars. You're an instructor, right? It takes more than that, T. It takes more than 24 hours. To which I'll say you're 100% right, and I wish it was a longer course, but at the end of the day, we know the American people, we know the people around the world, and something is better than nothing, so I'm going to take it, okay? Joe says you'll need 7 years of driver training. That'll just make you one day it will just make you overconfident. Maybe that's true, and we'll see. You know what? Maybe this could be a negative effect on everything else, but who knows? Anyway, without further ado, let me Jesus, again with the freaking webcam. Sorry about that, guys. Let me fix this problem, because you know what? I know what the people want to see, and that's my beautiful face. So let's be real. Okay, so we're going to get this in here. Bang, 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 bang. All right, we're going to do that. And we're going to do this. And we're good. Okay, we're back. All right. Fred says, give me 10 hours and I will get you good. You promise? All right, deal. So let's talk about why I brought you all to the podcast today, and what topic that I think is something that is just incredibly frustrating to me. Something that I'm really emotional about it, and I want to talk about it with you guys. So I'm going to set the stage, right? I'm going to set the topic, and we're going to talk about it. For whatever reason, the chat box isn't appearing. Let's see if it appears now. Anyway, I'll try to fix it as we go on. For those of you listening, there they go. Wow, look at them all populating. Love that. Okay. We are beginning to approach an era, okay? That era is where cars are just too good. Vehicles are starting to perform at levels we previously thought were only reserved for race cars. Production performance cars in many cases have not only more power than their racing counterparts, but more torque, less aero, and common passenger cars now rival older supercars. What is this world we're living in? Do you want an example? Here it is. Porsche, remember that car that I spoke to earlier, that 911 GT3? That GT3 Cup had 510 horsepower. Porsche produces the 911. We know it well. It's a tremendous machine. Okay, the 911 rocks. The S model 911, 443 horsepower. Okay, just like 70 less than the GT3 Cup. That number jumps to 640 horsepower if you opt for the Turbo S, which is 130 horsepower more than their GT3 race car. More. Not less, more. Okay? Now let's talk about lap times, because I know you guys are like, hey, it has more power, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's faster. On track, the race car's got more air, blah, 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 blah. 1 minute, 25 seconds dead is what a 991 GT3 Cup car did around Laguna Seca, okay? That's just a couple tenths faster than a McLaren Senna, which is a production car, by the way. A 992 911S, so the 443 horsepower variant, put down a 135, so there's about a 10-second delta there. But that's a car that has less horsepower, okay? What's the car with 130 horsepower more gonna do? I bet you it's close. And the problem that I have, okay, is if you take a look at some of the most beloved and sought after cars in the past, speed was never an object, right? Think about the cars, right? Think about what we have in the chat right now. I'm going to talk about it. Joe, your Miata. Fred, an FRS. A Lotus Elise. An E30 M3. An S2000. So on. Impulse RS. Pulsar GTIR, etc. The NSX, the original car. We can keep going, right? All of these cars. What's one thing they have in common? What's one thing? Anybody know? Anybody in the chat? Anybody can tell me what is one thing that all of these cars have in common? Okay, I'll tell you. You guys, you don't even have to answer. I'll tell you. I'm right here. I'm going to tell you. Okay, the one thing that all of those cars had in common, power wasn't the reason why you purchased them. No one is buying, okay, I'm going to get close to the microphone, so for those of you that are watching on stream, you're going to see my face go close to the MoneyShift logo, but that's because this point needs to be driven home, okay? Cars like the S2000, cars that have an ethos, just an unbelievable presence as a driver's machine. Okay, let's say you're not into Japanese. Yeah, that was stupid. Why would I assume that everyone's into Japanese? No, cars like the E30 M3, hallowed machines, storied cars, cars with immense history, cars, thank you, Ali, for the like, appreciate that, cars with, like, feel, cars with passion, cars with just excitement, okay? Power and performance weren't the main features. And that is what's gone away with today's machines. We live in a world, people, where a 2020 Mercedes GLC, which for those of you that aren't in the know, to Mercedes is bullshit alphanumeric, naming convention. The GLC is the small SUV. This is the Q5 competitor. This is the RDX competitor. It's a 2020 SUV that does 0 to 60, okay, 0 to 60 in 5.4 seconds. 5.4. What? 5.4 seconds. Fred says, fun story. I was also in the GT3 most of Saturday, the 997.240. It had a lower top speed, but has higher corner speed today and thus faster laps. That makes sense. Joe says 100 wheel horsepower per 1,000 pounds is the max you'll ever need. Miata is the answer. We know this. And let's remember, that's not to say that other good cars don't exist, right? There is obviously good cars in today's world. The Miata still exists. Fiesta ST still exists. FRS still continues to exist. Even the Camaro V8, right? A car with 400-something horsepower. These are all cars where power is not necessarily the focus, right? Even if I think of a car like the Camaro SS1LE, something that has over 400 horsepower, that's not the main calling card. The calling card to that car is its Alpha chassis, is its ELSD, it's its Brembo brakes, it's its feel behind the wheel, right? The power is just a plus, and it's usable power because of how good that car is, right? As you start to get more, right? The ZL1, the GT500, the fast Porsches, the McLaren is a brand, right? The 720S, the 765LT. These are all cars that are not usable to the common person, that are not usable around a common track. How the hell are you going to stretch the legs of a 765LT on a common road? Are you kidding me? Okay, this is a car that does burnouts with traction control on in any gear. And you mean to tell me that, I'm just driving. I just like how the body looks. And no, these are cars that need big tracks in order to really make use of them. You can't even use them on a tight track, a Canaan like we have here in the New England area, or like even a Tsukuba. You have one big straight there in Japan, but that's a lot of power, right? So I posted this on my Facebook status, and I was curious to see some of the responses that we got. And I want to read a couple of them here. And if you guys are in the chat, you haven't gotten your feelings out, tell me how you feel. Am I off base, right, to think that we live in a world where modern cars are too fast? Am I off base? Am I nuts? I don't think I'm nuts. I think I'm pretty. I know I'm wearing circle glasses, but I think I got my head screwed on pretty straight right now. So let me walk you through some of the comments that I saw in this sort of thought experiment that I did. And for those of you that are watching or listening, DM me if you're listening to the podcast. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Andrew says, especially compact luxury crossovers in the 60 to 80K range. So I'm going to be honest with you guys. I have no issue with performance car variants existing, right? Even back in the 80s, the 90s, we had STIs, we had 911 turbos, we had all of these performance cars. But the problem between then and now is now those performance cars are rivaling the race cars, right? Even the SUVs haul ass. What? For what purpose? Now you can tell me Thanasi, and a couple people did. Peter on the status said, quote, I'm not going to find his quote. Of course I'm not. Because Thanasi, that would mean I'm on time. I got everything ready. He says technology has to evolve, okay? He says, I've driven cars at modern speed limits from at least 7 of the last decade. Because they make them safer for us for faster travel, we should actually be able to drive faster. That's what he said. So for example, a car from 1930 drives differently at 70 miles an hour than a car from 2020. And for that, I totally agree. But there should be no reason why a 2020 Camry feels comfortable at 90 miles an hour. There should be no reason. There should be no reason that a Camry has 280 horsepower. There should be no reason why a Honda Odyssey has 280 horsepower. Fred says, what an amazing time to have cars like this out of the entirety of the time we exist in the time of giants. It is interesting. Like, I can't knock the fact that the cars that were able to drive without any additional license other than what we have are immense, right? On one side of the spectrum, you have the Dodge Challenger series, right? Whether that's the Demon, the Superstock, the Red Eye, the Hellcat, whatever acronym you want to come up with, right? These are cars that have over 700 horsepower from the factory, but are actually drivable, right? And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have cars like the McLaren 720S, the 765LT, the F8 Tributo. These are cars that are too much. These cars have gotten too fast to the point to where even some of the brand faithful don't like them. Ferrari, perfect example. Came out with the F8 Tributo, which is the successor to the 488, and they came out with the SF90. Both of those cars are held in the Ferrari circles as downgrades from the 488, from the 458, from the 430, from the 360. And the reason is the power, okay? Jason Cammisa actually talked about this too on one of the more recent Smoking Tire episodes. If you guys have watched that, definitely check it out. Jason Cammisa is unbelievable. Love that guy. Would love to have a conversation with him at some point. But he mentions, I don't know if you guys remember this, Ferrari created, let me look this up for you guys. So Ferrari spec race car, that's how I'm going to find it. Okay. There it is. So Ferrari created a one-off race car, okay? This one-off, that actually didn't help. That Google search might have been the worst search of all time. Ferrari one-off race car. There we go. Okay, there it is. We found it. We're in. Okay, so Ferrari created a vehicle that was based off the 488 GT3 chassis. Now, Jason talks about this, but I'm going to give you guys a summary. It's called the Ferrari P80C, and it's effectively just a rebodied race car, and it's a ton of fun to drive, apparently, right? It's got loads of aero, the right amount of power, nothing crazy, right? Nothing wild, you know, it does its thing. And then you get a car like the Ferrari SF90. This is a vehicle that makes 968 horsepower, and it's too much. No one likes it. Not one person. They all prefer the car that has 300 horsepower less, the car that, you know, just gets it done. Because at the end of the day, power doesn't matter. Power does not equal fun. Power does not equal good car to drive. And yet we're led to believe that technology advancements mean that we should have cars with more power, when that's not the case. We have the ability to provide safety. We have the ability to provide technology. We have the ability to provide all of these things in packages that can go as fast as we want them. It's up to us. They don't have to be faster, okay? They don't have to be bigger. They don't have to be anything, right? We can pick what they are, you know? Fred says, here's the thing, okay? You can't think and react at some of the speeds these do. It's more than the average human threshold. They can make the power. You can drive them, sure. At their limit is not the average driver. Exactly, right? These are cars where you can't even use their full potential. You can't even use half of their full potential on average roads. Yes, Brian, you hit the nail on the head right there. Usable power and fun driving experiences are the key to bring us back to a driving era full of amazing machines. You remember the 80s and 90s? Not everything was great. I'll give it to you. Not everything was good. There was definitely a lot of trash in that era. But what we did have were a lot of cars that were perfectly imperfect, right? You had the Beretta LTZ. That's an immense handling front-wheel drive car with 200-something horse, you know, whatever. I think it may be 180, actually. But front-wheel drive, great chassis, fantastic manual transmission, and a good-looking body, right? It had all the intangibles. Then, boom, E36 M3, amazing car, a far cry in terms of power from the M3s of today, but an amazing car, and one that is revered as a better M3 than the M3s of today. And yet power continues to improve. Their usable power decreases because their overall power level increases, right? Why is that? Why? I hate it. I don't like it at all because we've clearly proven that it's not necessarily for the car person, right? The car person, you know, you or the 10 or so people watching, revere vehicles that are not known for their power. We talked about a big list of them at the beginning of the show. S2000s, Civics, M3s of old, old Skylines, Evos, whatever, you name it, any country, Genesis Coupe if you want, from South Korea, whatever, right? All of those cars, for the most part, had under 350 horsepower, and yet all of them are probably better to drive than a brand new M3, than a brand new M2, than a brand new Supra, than a brand new 911 Turbo, whatever. Galen says the better M3 today is the Alfa Giulia. You just have to live close enough to a dealership to own it. You know what? On the Giulia note quickly, the 2.0 is actually fine. So if you get the Giulia TI, which I believe has around 300 horsepower and leverages that tremendous chassis, you're overall in a good car, and you can get those Giulias now sub 30 by a lot. I'm talking like a 2017 for like 25K, which is crazy. Brian says, what are your thoughts on stock high-power SUVs? Okay, so I'm going to bucket these in two categories. One is the AMGs, the M's, the RS's. These are mass-produced high-power SUVs. And then I'm going to look at the other side, which is like just the Durango Hellcat. Okay, so on the one end, the AMGs, all those cars, I think they're way too fast in terms of straight line speed, but I don't disagree with them existing, right? In our past, okay, let's look at our past. We had cars like the Typhoon, okay? We had high performance SUVs. Those always existed, you know, and they should continue to exist. There's no doubt about that. But why? Let me get the exact figure here. Mercedes GLC 63 AMG S horsepower. But why does it need to have 503 horsepowers? Why? Why is that a thing? Something that's more adequately in line is the GLC 43, 385 horsepower. Perfect. Love that. So, in other words, I'm a fan of the cars existing. I just don't think they need to be able to hit the speeds that they hit. It makes no sense. The Urus, whatever, there's always going to be a hypercar category, cars that were crazy, F1s, EB110s. Those were cars that were just a league above the common cars. So, whatever, I'll give the Urus its day. It can exist. But cars like the GLC 63, what the fuck? Like, you make no sense. Okay, so that's one side. The other side, like the SRT, Hellcat, Durango, love it. Publicity stunt by Dodge. They just wanted to get people into dealers, and they made a hell-breathing car that only exists for 1 year, and it doesn't represent something that the masses can do. So I'll take that. Fred says, slower with a chance of death and the need to not have a nanny. This is why we think they are better. SRT minivan, talk about this more. I mean, the Hellcat Pacifica, do this, please. So, two things there. One, you're 100% right. Do you remember, right, I'll call it, let's say 6 years ago. Okay. Maybe a little further than that. We'll say the E90 M3, that era. So, like 2008, right, was that car? This was an era of machine, probably the end of the era, where you could get away with turning off the traction control and driving the car every day. Okay? You're turning off the traction control, enjoying a little wheel spin, just letting the car feel itself. You're just loving it, you know? And today, we live in a world where automotive journalists... Yikes, that was an attempt at English. Automotive journalists, okay, are of varying driving abilities, right? So everyone from Chris Harris, Jethro on one side, Johnny Lieberman, and others on the other side. All of them are leaving traction control on these cars, and the reason is because the power is so damn high that they know they won't be able to use it. And they know that if they take it off, like if you take off the traction control in a McLaren 765 LT, you're going to lose. Shout out to Brad for the sub on YouTube. Thank you, Brad. Appreciate having you here. So it just blows my mind, right? Like, yes, Brian says they've released 1,000 horsepower Suburban, in 2019. It's unnecessary, but amazing. And I agree, those edge cases should exist. The Durango SRT that makes crazy horsepower is a 3-row SUV that does a quarter mile in stupid times. Yeah, love it. Send it. That car should 100% exist because it's a 1-year low production model car, right? But why does an Odyssey have 280 horsepower? Why does a Camry have near 300 horsepower? Why is a stick shift 181 horsepower Mazda 3 considered slow? You get what I'm feeling? You get where we're going with it? You get how I'm vibing with this? I have no problem with technological advancements, okay? Our ability to extract power out of things that are small is unbelievable. We covered a Peugeot today that had a sub 3-liter twin turbo engine that made 680 horsepower. Okay. We've covered in the past the Koenigsegg Gemera that has like a sub 3-liter engine that makes over 600 horsepower. That's unbelievable. We've hit all these power numbers, but we've reduced our ability to use them. We've reduced our ability to be able to maximize cars on modern roads. Galen says, and this is why I drive a 107 horsepower manual Fit. Now that's slow. There's no doubt about it. But it's a fun car to drive. And you know what? Leaving a stoplight, you can bang first, slam second, go into third, and you're at speed limit. Whereas if you do that in a Cayman, if you do that in a Corvette, second gear, 100 miles an hour. What are we doing? Why does a Cayman GT4 hit 100 miles an hour in second gear? Why does a Corvette hit 100 miles an hour in second gear? How is that an engaging? How is that a fun driving experience for everybody? Fred says, I honestly have never got needing to turn the stability and so on and off. If that thing saves you, if you see the light blinking, you're screwing up. So I'd agree. But in cars that exist today, right, where we have people that were used to driving a Chrysler K car with 150 horsepower, Chevrolet Celebrity, that are now upgrading to a brand new Impala. That Impala's got 300 horsepower. They need traction control because that's a lot more power than they're used to. Okay. Brian says 5 passengers in a Camry trying to merge on the highway. I don't think 300 horsepower is too much, especially if it's 5 of me. Hey, you'll know. Remember the HHR that a friend of ours father used to drive every day? He had to turn off the AC to get onto highway speeds up a hill. Okay, so if you got 5 people in your car, which is an edge case, you don't always have 500 people or 5 people in your car. Excuse me, did I say 500 people? Merging can take a little longer. You deal with it. Because that's not a thing that always happens, all right? And that's the reason why the Camry has 300 horsepower, because people are saying, hey, I got a lot of people in the car. I'm trying to merge onto the highway. I need some horsepower. Okay. Brad says, being able to overtake and get up to speed quickly is a safety issue. You also need to be able to gap your friends. Yes, being able to get up to speed quickly, okay? Oh, like going from 0 to 60 miles per hour to be able to merge onto a highway shouldn't happen past a certain delta of time, okay? But even a car like a Fiesta, like a Mirage that does 0 to 60 in 10 seconds is more than willing. Okay. More than willing to get up to highway speeds. It's fast enough. Fast enough. I'm sorry. Okay. Joe says, are you saying if stability light looks like a strobe light, you need smoother inputs, perhaps? Maybe that is what Fred is saying. Brian says, and that was only carrying some soda. You're right. It was an HHR panel van that was carrying some soda that needed to turn off the air conditioning to get to highway speeds. Bring back those days. What did Galen say in the chat? Sorry, I missed your comment, buddy. He says, at speed and gapped by my mom's Sienna. Yeah, man. My mother had a Sienna as well. It was all-wheel drive. Okay. And that thing had like 265 horsepower. That 2GR motor that was in the MR2, John's MR2 that we reviewed on the YouTube channel, that thing has no business being as fast as it does. And by the way, shout out to Toyota for actually reducing the horsepower in their Sienna by offering the hybrid. 243 horsepower, perfect sweet spot for that car. Perfect. Excuse me. All right. Rant over. All right. You guys have dealt with enough. You guys understand where I'm coming from. It's not that I'm not about technological advances, okay? I love them. Thank Christ for increased safety, okay? Thank goodness for the ability of things like magnetic ride control suspension that just soak up every bump, okay? I love all of that. I love it. I adore it. I live for it. But the one thing that I don't want, okay, is for a stock Camry to be faster than a 90s Ferrari. Slow the fuck down. Slow down. Brian says you hit the nail on the head at being able to blow through some gears without being at 100 miles per hour. And that's the ticket, man. If you're buying a manual car, why is second gear 100 miles an hour? Does anybody, do you know over there? Maybe... You know, over there, no one knows. That's not fun. Galen says, shout out to the Previa if we're talking about crazy vans. Yeah, you're right. There's a trivia thing for you. If you want to talk to your friends, you'll look, hey guys, what's the only mid-engine, all-wheel drive, boosted Toyota? And you give them like 30 seconds. Maybe you even let them guess. MR2, they'll say. They're wrong. It's the Previa. Toyota Previa. Fred says, more rant, be the cranky. Nah, man, I think I've aired all my grievances, and I appreciate everyone for commenting. Sam says, bit of an odd way to say you're scared of going fast in a car that's actually safe, and that's not what I'm saying at all, and I believe you guys know. Alex says, most cars have gotten a lot heavier over the years, and I agree. But most cars can perform better thanks to increased rubber technology and just a better understanding of traction control and things of that like. Right? Like, we've increased all of that tech so that 180... Excuse me, Jesus, that was a burp. So that 180 horsepower Mazda 3 does 0 to 60 faster than a performance car from the early 2000s, right? So we've proven that horsepower isn't the end all to speed, okay? Zach says, I was going to disagree with this earlier today. I've put some thought into it, and you're totally right. Duh. Yes, tonight is the airing of grievances. If anybody's in the chat right now and they got some things that they hate in the automotive industry, things that they just don't like, let's talk about it. Let's have a discussion. And if it's something I hate, I'm going to fight you on it to the death. Continuing on this, modern cars have made people worse drivers. Totally right. Fabian says, for real, an E63 S-Wagon with a 4-liter and a laptop does 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. For what reason? Love that. Okay. And while we're at it, I posted this in the stat. Those of you that worship the A80 Supra, that car's the reason the Supra died. It was too heavy. It was too expensive. No one wanted it. That's why the Supra died. Okay. Brian says, if you could set a standard for 0 to 60, what would it be for a passenger car? Great question. No Toyota Camry, okay, should do 0 to 60 faster than 6.5 seconds. None. I don't care if it's a TRD model. I don't care if it's a GR Sport. None. 0. 6 seconds. Excuse me, 6.5. I was just reading Joe's comment there. 6.5 seconds is what a passenger car could do. Whether it's a Mazda 3, whether it's a Honda Accord, whether it's whatever. 6.5 seconds, more than enough. Alex says, wow, never knew that about the Supra. Well, think about it, right? So the Supra ceased to exist because of the low sales from the A80 Supra, which means no one gave a shit about that car when it was new because it kind of sucked in stock form, right? And because no one bought them, Toyota didn't create an A90 till 15 years later. It's quick math, my friend. Quick math. Galen says, why couldn't we just follow Volvo and lift wagons? Why is everything to the crossover SUV craze? So I will say that is being fought a bit. Companies like Audi have brought back the A6 all-road type car. Mercedes is also selling an E-Class, I think they call it Terrain. Wagon, which is like a lifted, painted clad, whatever. So... you know, it is coming back. I mean, I highly doubt wagons are ever going to overtake the SUV, at least in the short term. But yeah, I hear you on those grievances. Fred says, preach on the Supra. I am old. Those things sat on lots and did not shit stock back in the day. They were near the same price as the 993 C4S and were slower. Totally agree. I don't know if anyone was local to the Massachusetts area remembers Westboro Toyota. They had a TRD Supra for the better part of a year and a half, and they actually had 3 of their cars past the Supra's life that were just for sale. That were new old stock because no one wanted the car because they were so expensive. Galen asks, should cars over a certain power level require at least an HPDE or HPDRE course? So I think that's interesting, right? Because you find yourself in a bit of a predicament where now you're sort of attaching homework on a lot of cars, right? Where I think this actually goes is there should just be an option for added training or added course that then certifies you for a faster speed. So you should still be able to buy whatever car you have, but if I've taken course X, Y, or Z, I now can drive 90 on the pike, 85 on the pike, whatever, right? Because that class has trained me how to use power, how to operate at speed, how to quickly maneuver, how to catch things, whatever, right? Those are my thoughts there. I don't think it should be, you know, a HBDRE course just because you get something like a GR Yaris, but I think it should be if you want to drive at a higher rate of speed on roads like, you know, common highways, the 405, 146, the Mass Pike, whatever it is, take a course, get trained, learn, right? Fred says, we all think the A80 was amazing. It was not for some time, and they killed it. Alex says, I never thought about it in that way, similarly to how many cars are shipped when they come out and sell low numbers, only to become sought after because of obscurity and low production. And to add to that, because of low costs, right? This is very true for cars like the A80 and like the NA1 NSX, NA2 NSX. Remember, towards the NSX end of its life, no one gave a shit about that car, and they sold horribly, right? It wasn't until you could start getting them for 20 grand, 25 grand, 30 grand, et cetera, that people started getting them. People started to appreciate the driving dynamics, and then people realized they didn't actually make a lot of them because they didn't sell well, and now prices go up, no one can afford them, and here I am crying because to this day I still don't have an NSX. Sorry, Dan, whatever it is, says Brad. Yeah, exactly. Dan, Dave, yeah. Fred says, Galen has a point. We are taught to follow the rules or just operate them, may not actually drive them, and we need to do some homework. Totally. I definitely do think there should be something there, but I think to force everyone that buys a certain class of car to take a course is not feasible. You just have to entice them to do it by allowing them to do something. Hey, you want to drive 85 on your public highway? Take this course where you'll learn how to drive a car at 85 if you don't want to do things like HPDE days where you can get instruction and just overall become a better driver, right? What else we got? What are some grievances? What are things that tick you guys off? I got a bunch, like why my background is off center. There we go. Yeah, no, there's so many things, and maybe that's what we'll do for next week's episode. How about this? Everybody in the chat, everybody listening to the podcast, what are things that just make your blood boil about cars? Brad quickly says, thick A and B pillars. Bring visibility back, sure. Think about those, bottle them, and send them to MoneyShift _ on Instagram and MoneyShift on Facebook. DM me personally, okay? I'm going to stop the podcast here, but we're going to keep going on the live stream. So thank you, everybody, on the podcast. I will see you next week. Goodbye. All right. With the podcast out of the way, let's keep this conversation going. Brian says that more cars aren't hybrids. Now, Brian, I'm actually going to agree with you for a second. I think every single passenger car should probably be a hybrid. There's no reason why, other than cost, that a stock Camry shouldn't be hybrid. Anyway. Joe Berger says, what course do I need to go 70 through a school zone? Well, first you got to have a car that can go 70. And knowing your current collection right now, you only have one, and it's the Sequoia, and it'll run out of gas before it gets to 70. So let's be real. Alex says, badly made cup holders that can't hold a large Dunkin' Ice. I'm with you, man. If you're going to sell a car in America, think of the American. I will say, so I have a, I'm going to say this for like the 100th time to everybody on here. So I have a 2005 Volkswagen Phaeton, right? Duh. And it's the reason why I have, for those of you joining late, it's the reason why I have these circle rim glasses, 100%. I look like a Porsche engineer. Das ist gut, this is Volkswagen Phaeton. Anyway, I can't put anything in those cup holders. I can put, a bottle of water, sure, because water's great. You got to hydrate, got something right here, But anything over a small whatever doesn't fit, and that's very frustrating. So I'm with you, Alec. Brad says, I got this. Okay, I'm excited, Brad. Fred says, RWB ruins air-cooled Porsches. Fight me. Okay. So let's talk about RWB. RWB. So for those of you that don't know, let me see if I can quickly pull one off the screen. RWB Porsche. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this. This is going to be, we're going to do something here. We're going to go window capture. Love it. Love it. Add source. Love it. Love it. There we go. Beautiful. Okay. You guys see that? Nice. Okay. So RWB Porsche 911, for those of you that don't know, are these bad Larrys right here. Okay. So I actually don't care either way about these cars, meaning I don't think they ruin the 911 because these are people that decide and want to make their 9911 this 9911, Jesus Christ, their 993 911 or 964 or 930, or now they're doing 997s. These are people that are choosing to make their car this way, right? RWB isn't buying up all the 993s and making them RWB cars. These are people that are say, I own a 993, I own an air-cooled 911, I want to make it wide body. And they choose this. So I have more of an issue with the owner, not the company. But anyway, Fred says, cup holders, if you're driving the car, why are you drinking? Alex says, need coffee to work. Exactly. My friend, I got an 1.5-hour commute to get to the collector shed. I gotta hydrate. For you ASMR people here. There you go. Silky. Silky smooth. Wrong pipe. Yikes. Jesus. Okay. All right. Oh. All right. Passed away there. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining this week. I wear a beer holding helmet when I drive. Okay. So I'm going to picture beer holding helmet while driving. Let's see. Yeah, it makes sense. Oh, shit. That's actually Brian. Guys, thanks, Brian, for that comment there. Found you. All right. They have no taste and need to be punished. Okay, fair. All right. I'm going to call it a stream for today, but I want to thank you guys for joining. Seriously, this is a ton of fun. There's going to be a couple things in the future that are going to be upgrades to the stream. I'm going to have the mic permanently closer to my face, so you guys will be able to hear my soft, smooth vocals. Okay? So that's one. Number two, we're upgrading the lighting situation, so I'm excited for that. Things are just overall great. Alex says, are there any good aftermarket cup holders? My 318 Ti is partially stripped and has no cup holders. If anybody knows, DM that man, Alec Graham. Give him a shout out. Yeah, no worries, guys. This was a ton of fun. Thank you, everyone, for joining. There will be an episode next week. Super pumped about that. Hope to see everyone there. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you haven't, subscribe below to the MoneyShift YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook for more content. There's definitely going to be a lot of Phaeton stuff coming on the YouTube channel. A full review of why I bought that car and some other things. So I'm looking forward to showing that to everyone. Got a couple cars that I want to line up, including a Cadillac CT6. Thank you, Karen, for the follow. Appreciate that. See you later, everybody. Thank you, everyone.